Good afternoon. My name is Nia K. Evans. I'm the Executive Director of the Boston Ujima Project. Before we get started today, we'd like to take a brief moment of pause to honor those whose lives have been cut short by the violence of white supremacy. Thank you for joining us today, and on behalf of the Boston Ujima Project, welcome to the Chuck Turner Black Trust Arts and Lecture Series. We are thrilled to share virtual space with you. The Boston Ujima Project is a Black-led, democratic organization with a mission to return wealth to working-class communities of color. Black Trust Chuck Turner Arts and Lecture Series brings communities together to discuss concepts which frame the relationships in a community: trust, belief, and faith. This event is part of our A Loving Embrace 2021 Real Estate Assembly Workshop Series. To learn more and register for our other events, visit www.alovingembrace.eventbrite.com. Before my colleague Paige Curtis introduces our esteemed guests, I'd like to say thank you to our partners: Black Economic Council of Massachusetts, BECMA, and Black Expo, Glenn Lloyd, Cooperative Fund of New England, Boston Impact Initiative, Fenway CDC, Boston Neighborhood Community Land Trust, Local Enterprise Assistance Fund, Somerville Community Corporation, and Dudley Street Neighborhood Initiative. Now we'll turn it over to Paige, who will introduce our guests. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Today we are excited to be joined by multidisciplinary artist Justin Hicks and Tela Troge, Esquire, lawyer and member of the Shinnecock Nation and Nipmuc Tribe. Tela Loretta Troge is a member of the Shinnecock Indian Nation and a member of the Nipmuc Tribe. Tela graduated from Michigan State University College of Law with a Juris Doctor and certification in Indigenous Law and Policy from the Indigenous Law Program. She has been fighting for tribal sovereignty for the past 5 years as the attorney with the law offices of Tela Troge, PLLC. Welcome, Tela. We're also joined by Justin Hicks, who's a multidisciplinary artist, composer, and vocalist who uses music to investigate themes of identity, labor, American dream aesthetics, and instinctual value systems. His work has been featured at Performance Space New York, the High Line, MoMA, Mass MoCA, the Whitney Museum, and many, many more. Hicks has collaborated with notable artists including Abigail DeVille, Charlotte Braithwaite, Michelle Ninjiocello, Colleen Smith, Aisha Jordan, Helga Davis, and Lynn Nottage. Welcome, Justin and Tela. The floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm just going to jump in and play a few things for you. This first thing is kind of like a prayer for our collective body. When the night comes, body, someone might call somebody. I want to go back. Call me, 'cause when it all fades away, I'll have this body.
body, body who, body, body who loves, body who loves, body who loves, so let the light come, treat this body a light that lights all stars and bodies. 'Cause when it all fades away, I want this body, I want this body, body, body who, body, body who loves. Body, I'll have this body, body who loves, body who loves,
This next tune is in honor of the rest we all need, and in honor of, I guess, the rest we need, and to acknowledge that sometimes to work and work and work is the last thing you should be doing. I think everybody kind of knows that already, though. I've been really interested more than ever in hearing the question, answering the question, and asking the question, how are you doing? And how have you been doing? So here we go. Oof, sorry about that.
have you been sleeping? How have you been sleeping? Sleeping is for everyone else. Should you be awake? How have you been breathing? How have you been seeing things when living is for everyone else? Should you be awake? How are you this evening? Did you have to climb on through? Winning is for everyone else. Are they really winning? Leave a little headroom. Leave a little leg room too. Well, comfort is for everyone else, not me. Are they feeling nice? Blaming isn't winning. No one can escape the truth, 'cause you'll be seen by everyone else. Are you seeing things? How have you been sleeping? How have you been sleeping? Well, dreaming is for everyone else. Should you be awake? Should you be awake? Should you be awake? Will we go on shrinking? How do you think this ends? 'Cause futures are for everyone else. Should you be awake? Who are you protecting? Who, when you're killing me? Who is it you're trying to impress? Evil is a thing. Where is it all going? Are we there yet? Are we there yet still? What is this location I'm in? Should I be awake? Should I be awake? Where is your maze? Do you wanna get into it? It's in your body. Are we invisible? Did you fall in love? with it. You ain't wanna leave it. Felt too good. You should be tired. But I wanna hear my own beat. My own beat. My own beat. Mostly I melt when I fly. I'll be too high to stay up. We aren't entirely forgettable. And now we'll need another thing. Love it and then you tire. It's not inside your head. It's here in the flesh. My own beat. My own beat. My own ways. We need another time. I've had this day before, and so make me another pair of wings, my own wings, my own fame, my own beat, my own beat.
Thank you.
Hi, it's such an honor to be here. My name is Tela Loretta Troge. I am a member of the Shinnecock Nation as well as the Hassanamisco Nipmuc Nation, which is located in Grafton, Massachusetts, about 1 hour outside of Boston. I identify as a member of these tribal nations and also as a triracial person with a legacy of strength and survival. Survival for my people in Massachusetts was exceptionally brutal. The way that we were treated, we were subject to near extinction at the hands of the colonial and the United States government. There's still federal policies that exist that are at our complete detriment. We've had a lot of our resources and wealth stolen from us, almost all of our land. Our reservation in Massachusetts, it's only 2 acres. It's one of the smallest in all of the United States. It's a very sacred land to us, and a lot of my work as an attorney has been focused on defending the land and protecting the water. And so I want to talk to you today about that, about my work in defending the land, but I also want to talk to you about some of the federal policies that have made this type of work necessary. And so I want to talk to you a little bit about the Mashpee Wampanoag tribe. I am not sure who's been following along, but they have a really fascinating history in the state of Massachusetts. A lot of people know the story of Thanksgiving. The Mashpee were the first to meet the colonists when they arrived and were very hospitable, and in return had all of their land stolen, and they were enslaved. And after the Pequot War, the Mashpee and my tribe, the Hassanamisco, Nipmuc, and most of the other tribal nations in Massachusetts were subject to internment on Deer Island, which is an island right outside of Boston, and subject to just horrible conditions. There was no food, there was no water. Most people, weren't able to survive the winter there. And so when I talk about this legacy of strength and survival, it really is just that. It goes very deep, and so it's really hard to talk about all of the inequality that we face, the injustice. But that's why the work that I do is so important, to try to restore some of this, to try to help build a future where resources are more equitably distributed. And so we have a lot of work to do. There's federal policies that exist to this day that discriminate against triracial communities, such as the two communities that I come from. And so it all can be really traced back to a papal doctrine that was from like 1524 that says basically that it's okay for European people to colonize and steal land from people who have brown or black skin. And so this papal doctrine was incorporated into foundational United States law through the United States Court, the Supreme Court, through what's known as some foundational cases called the Marshall Trilogy. And so what we see is that this principle, this religious principle that is the basis of a lot of the inequality and land theft that we see today, was incorporated into the law. And it's a really horrible thing. It still exists. And there's a lot of denominations who are actively trying to fight against this, especially in light of the history of Indian boarding schools in both the United States and Canada being exposed. There's been hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of bodies of children who were stolen from their families. This happened a lot in Massachusetts and colonial New England, where we call it a policy of assimilation, where the colonial governments and the United States governments tried to break up the family structure of people who they thought were less than human, subhuman. They were treated as, which was basically anybody who didn't have white skin. And so there's just this horrible history of children being stolen and sometimes never coming back from these boarding schools. And so what this really does to people is it creates something called historical trauma. And so historical trauma is a huge barrier to the work that we have to do to correct some of the injustices, to help bend the arc of justice towards what's right, what's equitable, what's just. And so what we see happening here, especially in Massachusetts with the Mashpee, is during the last presidential administration, we had President Trump basically terminate the reservation of the Mashpee Wampanoag, which that hasn't happened in the United States since the 1950s, with a policy called Indian termination, where basically the United States was terminating its relationships with Indian tribes and breaking treaties and doing all kinds of horrible things. And so in more recent times, the United States has adopted a policy of something called Indian self-determination. And how federalism is set up in the United States is that all Indian tribes are supposed to be treated equally, but that's not happening in New England because we have this history of being discriminated against because of our ancestral background, again, being triracial. And so so we see a case in 2009. It's called Carcieri. And Justice Thomas had ruled against the Narragansett Indian tribe and said that this tribe wasn't sufficiently Indian enough to have come in under something called the Indian Reorganization Act. And so it was a really bad ruling, but it rippled through the entire coast of New England and prevented any type of equity for New England tribes, first contact tribes, anyone who had experienced the horrors of the original 13 colonies. It made us almost impossible for us to reclaim any of the land that was stolen from us. And most all of our ancestral territory was stolen from us by the original settlers to this nation. Again, our reservation in Grafton is only 2 acres. And so I'm currently based on the Shinnecock Reservation, which is on Long Island in New York. We have about 1,000 acres left here, but it's really just a small fraction of what we had originally before contact. And so a lot of the work that I do is in reshaping the narrative, getting the truth out there, letting people know our strengths, letting people know the true history of colonization, of enslavement in New England, of land theft, of the spread of endemic and pandemic disease, which is often the basis of the theft of resources from Native communities. And so a lot of the work is in overcoming that. And so how do we do that? What does it look like? And so foundationally, we have to reshape the narrative that some people are less than other people. And it's not easy, of course, to have people unlearn everything that society has taught them. It's often not taught in schools. The educational system leaves a lot to be desired in that regard. But so personally, one of the biggest reasons why I went to law school was to really just search for justice, push for justice. My tribe is Shinnecock Nation was involved in a process of attempting to get what's called federal acknowledgement for over 32 years. I'm 34 years old, so most of my entire life was going through this process. And we were continually held back in the process because the federal government had the policy of excluding us because we intermarried with Black and white. And so therefore they found that we were not sufficiently Indian. However, during the Obama administration, we were able to have a more equitable solicitor, a more equitable administration who made the determination that we were in fact the descendants of the original people of this land. We are the only group of people, Native people, who have to document our ancestry back to the 1600s. It's a horrible thing to have to do. I spent most of my childhood going to different churches and cities in Massachusetts to try to prove who my ancestors were. I recently actually just joined the Daughters of the American Revolution, which shocks a lot of people when I tell them that. I was inducted last week at a powwow honoring the veterans. And so typically this group has been very exclusionary, but we were able to trace back the history of one of my ancestors, Ishmael Coffey, who was a resident of Medham, Massachusetts, and he was an enslaved person who was granted freedom for fighting with the colonists throughout the American Revolution. And so a lot of people don't know the history of early slavery within New England, and it's a problem. It's something that I think that we need to collectively address. So we have to go through this process of educating basically the federal government, the local government, our neighbors, all of our, basically everybody, right? It's a never-ending fight, but that's what the fight is. The work is in retelling, reshaping the narrative, retelling the foundation of this country, and fighting again for a more equitable distribution of resources. And so a lot of the work that I do now is reclaiming the sacred sites that have been stolen from us. So it's a lot of time in the record rooms. It's a lot of time of tracing back our ancestry. It's a lot of looking through very dusty land records and using the judicial system and other systems, municipal town systems, state systems to access resources and to help tell the story, to educate people, and to build relationships with allies who can help amplify our struggles, who can help us access resources that historically, by design, institutions have cut off from us, to us. And so last year, during the height of the pandemic, my nation was sued by the state of New York for having the audacity to attempt to engage in economic development in order to provide for our children and for our elders and all of our tribal members to just have a basic standard of living. And so this was in the height of COVID. Inequality, it was really a light was shown on how bad things are. Again, the Shinnecock Nation is surrounded by Southampton, New York, which is the playground of the rich and famous, millionaires, billionaires. There's just this incredible wealth. And so it's really jarring. It's shocking to a lot of people to even find out that there is an Indigenous tribal nation on Long Island. But when we invite people to come and visit us, they're shocked by the juxtaposition of the inequality. You have people who are struggling to survive, and then a street over, you have some of the priciest real estate, the biggest mansions in the country. So it's hard to struggle every day and do the work while you're focusing on just having your daily needs met, right? So that's been something that it's a huge barrier to most people. And so a lot of the work is collectively, like it can't be one person, it's a collective thing. So we have to bring everybody over that line. And so economic development for my nation is the way to do that. And it goes back to the foundational principles of the federal policy that we're in now, the Indian self-determination, where we have the right as sovereign nations to take care of ourselves, to engage in trade, just how we would have before contact with other tribal nations, other sovereign entities, and so on and so forth. And so what we see happening, though, is these colonial governments have such a stronghold, especially in the 13 colonies, that they don't want to relinquish the power that they have given themselves. And again, the foundational principles that have embedded into the judicial system and all of the laws that have passed are designed to extract resources from people. And so a lot of it is trying to build up the economies. So every time you try to do something, a roadblock is thrown in the way. So recently, during the pandemic, we had a 1 month long protest outside. We were camping on a piece of our ancestral land where we were able to document through genealogy that all of our tribal members were descended from. We were forcefully removed from that ancestral territory in 1859 when the state of New York stole 4,200 acres of land for us in order to build a railroad to bring wealthy Manhattanites into the Hamptons for summer vacation. And so what we did was we put up 2 monument signs that had digital advertisements on them. And almost immediately, New York State dragged us into court, said we had no right to do it, said that we were not Indian, that we couldn't, that even if the land was Indian land, it didn't matter because we had lost our Indian identity by intermarrying. And just all of this really horrible, destructive, hurtful, but most importantly, untrue tactics to try to prohibit any type of meaningful economic development for us. And so our camp was highly successful. We were able to raise a lot of media attention, and we were also able to show what conditions are like when you're cut off from access to resources. Even now, we have situations where we have tribal members, elders who are unhoused, who are living in tents, who have exposure to the elements. We had, it was horrifically, we had elders who froze to death that winter. We were in a crisis. So we spent the entire month outside, camping, protesting, the state of New York and its policies. We were trying to plead to the federal government to help us. And so even despite that, the state of New York, been about a year now, still maintains this lawsuit, which is very expensive to litigate for what's right and what's just. The state lacks any merit in any of their arguments. And so as a result of that, we were able to gain enough attention that we did start to have access to some money to fight back. And we were able to create partnerships and allyships that enabled us to finally, for the first time since colonization, have any type of attempt at getting any of our land back. And so you hear land back a lot now. It's a movement. It's spreading across the United States, Canada, anywhere that Indigenous people have been colonized and harmed by this papal doctrine, again, originating in 1524, that continues to be such a destructive force in taking resources. And so there's this nationwide movement to reclaim land that was stolen. And it's especially important now while we're facing climate change. And for the Shinnecock Nation, we're surrounded on all sides by water. We're rapidly losing territory due to rising sea levels. All of these billionaires, they never figured out any type of septic system in the 400 years that they've been here. And so all of their waste goes directly into our water, completely killing all of the marine life. We survive. We live in a really beautiful place. It's incredibly bountiful. There's more than enough resources for everybody here. There's no need for this capitalistic expectation that, you know, some people have everything while others have nothing. And so a lot of the work that we're doing also is to challenge that. And so it's part of Land Back. And so one of the most exciting projects I'm working on is with a group of Indigenous women. We consider ourselves to be water protectors, and we are growing a crop called sugar kelp. It's an indigenous seaweed that Native people throughout New England have traditionally used for all kinds of things, from fertilizing crops to insulating homes. It's also used as a medicine, but right now we're using it to clean water, to extract nitrogen and carbon from our water, to attempt to fight back against the colonization, fight back against this destructive exploitation that we see with these billionaires. They don't care about the land. They don't care about the water. They're not thinking ahead about the survival of the next 7 generations like we are. And so when we're looking at what land we want to reclaim in our ancestral area, we're looking at the highest watershed points. Of course, it's important for water quality, but these are also our most sacred sites because it's where we buried our dead. And it's a really sad situation. It's really horrible. But here in Southampton, the highest points that are most sacred to us is also where people like to build their homes. And so we're rapidly trying to fight against overdevelopment, and we're telling people, you know, you can't build a mansion there because it's a burial ground. And it happens all too often that we're called because there's construction happening and human remains are unearthed. And of course, it's always a big shock, right? Even though we've been saying it, begging and pleading and doing everything we can. But now that we have an ability, again, to access resources that have been, by design, cut off from us for hundreds of years, we're able to proactively now purchase what little bit remains undeveloped through a partnership with the Baconic Land Trust. And we just made our first acquisition, so it's very exciting. It was a 4.6 acre parcel of land called Sugarloaf Hill in the Shinnecock Hills, which was the land that was stolen from us in 1859 by the state of New York. So since that theft happened in 1859 until a couple of months ago, we've been completely cut off from the entire area. We couldn't even go there to pray. We were threatened with arrest anytime we attempted to, you know, even step foot there to say a prayer to our ancestors. And so this 4.6 acre parcel cost $5.6 million. So it's mind-boggling to think about that, to think about coming from a place where there's not enough money to even go to the grocery store, to buy your child diapers, you know. So where are we going to get $5.6 million to purchase 4 acres of land? But we were able to do it, again, through strategic partnerships, through wealth building, and through the support of our allies. And it's a lot of that is through education, through letting people know the truth, through speaking the truth at every single opportunity, by calling out federal policies that are affecting so negatively all of the tribes in New England that, again, have this basis in racial discrimination. And so it's important that, you know, we can build our network as big as possible, have as many people as possible know this truth, know that it's still affecting us, and actively resist and work against it and dismantle it. And a lot of it is rooted in things that control like our everyday lives, like capitalism and just everything from Supreme Court law to all the laws and everything that shape our daily lives. So it's a struggle. It's a struggle, but we have to stay strong. And so one of the things that's most inspiring, even though it's horrible and tragic, is that my ancestors were able to survive these brutal conditions. I always think about Deer Island and how did my ancestors survive not having any food, not having any water, not having any shelter during the winter in Massachusetts on Deer Island. And so that gives me strength to pursue this access, not only for myself, but for my entire community, to land, to resources, to the courts, to fighting against federal policies that affect not only my nation, but all the tribal nations throughout New England, but also for all communities, everybody that we share this land with. We all need clean water, and we all need to act together to make sure that we protect the land, defend the land, and protect our water and our natural resources, and enable, again, equitable access to resources for all. Nobody can deny that this is an extraordinarily abundant place. There's enough for everyone, and we can envision a future where access is not denied to anybody, and where resources are distributed equitably to everybody. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tela. That was so beautiful. Can Justin also come on stage? So we're about to get into the Q&A. Thank you so much to everybody who has said so many wonderful things in the chat. I'd love to give y'all a short round of applause. So some of the things that were said in the chat: this is beautiful from Shagun. We need to know our history. Thank you from Teak Wellbeing. Thank you at Tela. I was not ready, says Toby. Coffee family legacy here. Thank you for your courage, Tela. And finally, Black Native American checking in from Hakeem. Thank you all so much. So I guess we can just get into it. My first question is to Tela. Can you tell us a little more about Shinnecock Nation's background and history, and how large is the nation?
Sure. So we have about 2,000 tribal members today. Almost 800 live on our tribal territory, surrounded again by Southampton, New York. The rest of us live across the country and even across the globe. We come from a place called Nipmuc, which is it's an isthmus. It's a very sacred piece of land to us. It's surrounded by the Atlantic Ocean, the Peconic Bay, and the Shinnecock Bay. And we traveled extensively throughout New England. We have a lot of intermarriages throughout the East Coast. And we were federally recognized finally in 2010 after a 32-year court battle. And the future is very bright for us.
Thank you, Tela. Next question. This is a question for Justin. Justin, you called your first song a prayer. What informs your musical practice, and how did you come to understanding sound as prayer?
Well, I grew up in a church of my parents' making, actually. My parents started a church when they were young, maybe in their late 20s, early 30s. And it wasn't like what you might imagine a typical church to be like. We all kind of stood in a circle, and my mom would use a shaker, and we sang songs to each other, toward each other. And she also used music and singing in particular to speak about injustice. And gosh, I can't imagine. It's hard for me to think about an issue that she didn't raise through her music or through the music of others. Even she had a practice and a band kind of that I would compare kind of to the work of Odetta. She sang a lot of spirituals, a lot of old songs, and a lot of work songs, and a lot of even political folk songs. Everything from Sweet Honey in the Rock to Jackson Browne, to some jazz standards. She really kind of imparted kind of this awareness that your voice can actually be used to bend the arc. And when I imagine that song that I sang before, the first song, which is actually kind of a remix of a Whitney Houston song, if you really kind of listen to it deeply, as a kind of, earlier this past year, I was working on a project that was highlighting the portraits of New Yorkers as they went through the pandemic. And something that I kept thinking about was breath, and how the idea of breathing became so tricky for people, and how if we reduce everything down to the use of breath, and singing is one of those things that I connect very, very deeply with, breath and breathing. But it also became one of those very dangerous things, or it was said to be dangerous during the pandemic. I just find to use your voice metaphorically, to use it physically, to use it in any way is a very sacred thing. And even, whether you're singing or not, the voice and what you have to say is always a prayer to me. And we have to be mindful of what we are actually putting out there and what we're asking for, or what we're saying to each other. So yeah, I think that I don't know if that really answers the question, but that is my first kind of connection to sounding and to making sound as a way to create awareness and to corroborate. Yeah.
It does, Justin.
And to throw it back to Tela, we did want to know a little bit more about the legal precedent and history, first behind the exploitation of Indigenous peoples that are First Contact Nations, and also I think that you touched on this initially, the Indian self-determination policy.
That's a great question. So when you look at the history of the country, and especially the United States, you see different policy errors. So you see at first Manifest Destiny and this rush to expand west, and then you start to see assimilation, where there was an attempt by the federal government to strip Native people of their identity, of their culture, of their family ties and backgrounds. And then we see an allotment policy, where land was stolen from Native people. There were all kinds of just false arguments made that we weren't utilizing the land, we weren't farming them, so therefore they needed to be allotted to people, to settlers who would use them. And so we see a lot of land loss during that time period, which led to in 1934, when we were really in an economic downturn, sort of like what we see now, the passage of an act called the Indian Reorganization Act. And so this tried to fix all of those policies of allotment, of termination, of assimilation, and bring us to the point where we are now of Indian self-determination, restore sovereignty to Indian tribes, restore the ability to meaningfully participate in economic development. And so it's a really good thing, except for the fact that all of the New England tribes are excluded from this policy due to racism, and it's very well documented. But it's something that the Mashpee, Wampanoags are fighting for, the Shinnecock Nation are fighting for, and the current administration, the Biden administration, has explicitly said that they are working to end white supremacy, and reversing these federal policies that inequitably affect New England tribes would go a long way in doing that. That's the work that's being done now. And so that way, when those federal policies are overturned, we can truly see Indian self-determination for what it's supposed to be for all tribal nations.
Thank you so much. And to you both, how can we stay in touch with your work and continue to follow you?
Go ahead, Tela.
So you can follow me on Instagram. I use the tag at Warriors of the Sunrise. We have a link tree in there, so whatever current fights we're engaged in, we have calls to action every now and then. But a phone call and an email sometimes can go a long way in the pursuit of justice for us. But Instagram is definitely the best way. And again, it's Warriors of the Sunrise.
Instagram is also a good way to keep track of the things I'm doing, whether it's art or music. I do a lot of collaborative work. I also work in theater. So currently, if you're in New York and you want to see a little bit of what I do, I was part of the creative team for Colored Water, which is playing at the Public right now, and also a play by Lynn Nye. You didn't hear me say any of that, did you?
Nope. A current play by who?
Okay, Justin Hicks Music on Instagram is how you can best keep track of what I'm doing. I work a lot in theater, art, and music proper, so I pretty much post everything that I'm involved with there. And yeah, that's pretty much the best way. I also have a band called The Hot Plates, which is myself, my wife, and my sister, and we make a lot of work together. And we have a visual EP out that you can check out. It's called Make Me Down, Songs for Making It Through Alive, which you can find through our website, which is thehotplates.com. And hot is spelled HAWT in that name. So it's HAWTPLATES.com. Yes.
Well, thank you both. I mean, that was such a wonderful presentation. So thank you, Tela. Thank you, Justin. And thank you to all the viewers for attending this edition of Black Trust. If you had a great time, please let us know in the chat. And again, we want to thank our partners for their support of A Loving Embrace 2021 Real Estate Assembly and Black Trust. If you'd like to learn more about Boston Ujima Project and our work, or become a member, you can visit our website, www.ujimaboston.com, or follow us on social media at Ujima Boston on all platforms. The fun isn't over. Over the next few weeks, we're going to have a couple more exciting events happening around our real estate assembly. On November 29th, we'll be joined by CF&E for an exciting workshop on acquiring and controlling property in our neighborhoods. And we'll have a bunch more to be announced. So visit us at alovingembrace.eventbrite.com. As always, you can join us at Ujima Wednesdays every Wednesday from 6 to 7:15. That is our political and financial workshop series. And if you feel moved, you can visit our member teams to co-create with us from 7:15 to 8:30, again, every Wednesday. If you are a Ujima member, please be sure to check out our upcoming voting opportunities. Right now, you can vote on the Cultural Assembly ballot, which is moving $60,000 to local artists and organizers for public art projects. And as always, stay on the lookout for our real estate ballot, which is coming up in December. We're going to be building some a real estate investment plan. So if you, again, want to move some money, do it with us, with the Cultural Assembly ballot and with the real estate ballot. Thank you all for joining us tonight. Stay safe. Have a good night.